Hi. Okay, so today we're going to talk about travel with little ones. And I actually started the opposite way than a lot of people in here started, is that I was traveling first, and we were backpacking across Guatemala, and we were like, let's have babies. And so we were like kind of figured it out on the road as we were going. We had been married for 6 years and didn't have kids because we lived in Boston and we lived in the corporate kind of community. All of our friends were taking 3 months off to have a baby, coming back, doing the daycare thing. And that was scary to me. And then I saw travel. Was that a little loud? Travel kind of opened my eyes to the idea that like, oh, I can live overseas for cheap. I don't have to work so much. Both me and my husband can be at home with the kids. We can do fun stuff. Like the idea of being a parent, all the things that were scary about it, like the baby wasn't scary, it was like the lifestyle choice. Like how am I gonna juggle being a project manager working 60 hours a week and doing corporate travel and having a baby? So it was actually travel that was like, gave me the baby fever, and I was like, yes, I'm gonna do this. So we had our first child when I traveled throughout my pregnancy. I was the first travel writer that Belize Tourism ever had that was pregnant. They had never had someone pregnant come on a press trip before. They had to have a special phone call with me to ask me like what I needed, and I was like, massages, chocolate, like. And a lot of people along the way told me it was gonna be extremely dangerous to bring a baby with me, and that, you know, you should wait until they're older. And I didn't listen and did it anyway. We went to Colombia when my first was 4 months old. And the amazing thing about when you first travel with small children, especially if you've traveled before that, is the difference you see immediately in how people interact with you. So we had been backpackers for a year. We had lived overseas. We were kind of invisible in our own bubble. You have a baby, you're like a celebrity. You walk into a restaurant, they're like, the baby's here. You know, people will pick up your baby. You start to learn really quickly that people, of course, everywhere in the world, people love children, but the style of parenting is different. You know, this idea of communal parenting is something that I wasn't familiar with growing up in the United States, where single family households, single generation, you're on your own, maybe your parents help, and then you go somewhere like Colombia or you go to Thailand and you see, oh, the aunties, the grandma, you know, the sisters, the cousins, they're all taking care of the babies. They're all kind of raising each other's children. So the atmosphere is not so much like looking at the parents and being like, hey, you need to do something about your child, they're gonna run into traffic. But instead, it's communal. They say, oh, there's a child, let me go pick up this child and return it to its parent. You know, because we're all here to take care of the kids in the community. So immediately, for me, I was like, sold, you know, and it changed a lot about how I thought about parenting, because I had the luxury for the first time of being outside of my own culture that has very certain specific rules about how we parent. And being in a different culture, you're not held to that standard. So you float in this space between two cultures, and you have kids, and you can do kind of whatever you want, and no one, you know, you're not accountable to these sets of rules. So that was, for me, that was one of the game changers for doing that. So we just decided we're gonna do all of our travel with our kids. We're gonna just go for all these things that we haven't heard other people doing. So we did the round the world trip with a baby, we filmed a documentary. We went to places that were considered dangerous, like Beirut, and learned Arabic. We went and bike camped across Europe with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we did the kind of travel that people were like, you need to wait until they're much older. So I want to talk today kind of about some of the logistics of that, how that works, the things I learned to care about, and the things that I don't worry about. Okay, so first, a lot of times people say, is it safe to go to a place that has violence? And I have to pull up this, I live in Mexico right now, so I have to tell people these numbers like all the time. 35 million tourists come to Mexico every year. 265 Americans die. mostly from car accidents, drowning, and suicide. Like, it's a dangerous country if you're writing about politics. It's dangerous if you're in a drug cartel. But a lot of times, people assume crime in general means dangerous for tourists. And you can look up these numbers for any country if you ever have concerns about danger, is that tourists, visitors like us, are rarely the targets of violence. So there's the Department of State keeps total records. You can download them by any country if you just go Google that website, and you can see every single death and the cause of death for every country in the world. And I've had to pull this out because I've been blogging about this. So many like people, you know, you're going to Beirut, you're going to die. You know, like I've heard that about like pretty much every country we've been to. And it just simply isn't true. So I don't worry about the danger side. I don't obviously put myself into situations I think will be crazy dangerous, but in general, most places are safe. And the great thing about when you're with young kids doing this travel, I really want to start a movement. I'm going to launch it right now today. It's called the baby year. You know, like everyone takes the gap year. I think the baby year we should be taking, because you're going to be home, you're not going to sleep, you're not going to be doing any of that stuff, right? You're miserable. Why? Just go out for that whole year. Go to Thailand, then take a bus down to Malaysia, go over to Bali, do the whole circuit of the Southeast Asia. Like, just enjoy your life as much as you can, because you're going to be like sleepless anyway. Are you guys with me on that? Yeah. Yes? Okay, so I have done stuff with kids. There's always safety concerns, and there's some cultural stuff. So like car seats, people worry about. And the one thing that I don't want, if you feel like you need to have car seats, I totally respect that. But also you have to understand that traffic is different in different countries. And so in the United States, you're driving 65 miles an hour down a highway where everyone's driving really fast and commuting to work every day. Is different than if you're driving 15 miles an hour on a tuk-tuk in the middle of Thailand, and people are cultured there, like accustomed to not having car insurance, not having money, not being able to ever risk their entire financial livelihood by crashing their car. They give you the right of way. They're very careful drivers, you know? So there's some cultural stuff where I feel like it's a choice, but like when you're traveling to these other places with young kids, there's places like Thailand, I don't use car seats. Adjusting to the local safety standards is something that's like a personal choice, but that's one thing that, you know, I could just put out there is like, I see a lot of travels, you come with the car seats, and then after a couple months, you're like, you kind of toss them, because you're like, oh, this isn't gonna work. But there are things that I am concerned about, and I do not mess with. There are three things. One is water, and with young kids, you can't, what happens is they get sick. They end up puking everywhere, they get diarrhea, and it's just not fun. They will survive it, but it's not fun. And so places like if you're in India, where the water is so bad that like even a little bit in the mouth is gonna be a problem, we do bucket baths. You can get a bucket from any hardware store anywhere in the world. People have buckets everywhere, you know? You get a little bucket, you get bottled water. They will often, if the water is bad in that country, they often sell them in like big drums of like 5 gallons. You heat a little bit of water, you give your baby a purified water baby bath in a bucket. If they're too big for that, we get a swimming pool, like one of those little kiddie pools that are inflatable. I think this is the most brilliant thing in the world, actually. Because it's the shower, you put them in the shower, and what does your 4-year-old do? Like the second they're in there, and you're like, oh my God, like, you know, like if the water is bad in that country, you can't have them do that. So we fill it up with the water, and then we monitor the bath, so we know they're not drinking the water. So like, that's like, you know, you can work around, even being in India, where the water is just completely undrinkable, you can still give your kids baths and figure out ways to do that. The second thing is food. I don't mess with that. The rule of thumb for me is, where are the locals eating? How fast is the turnover? Is it hot? Like they're cooking it fresh. You're probably always, I never get sick from that. I always get sick from like the tourist places, or it's dead, and there's like 3 guys in there, and you're like going, you're like, oh, this is gonna be delicious. You're gonna be, I did that to myself in India. It was like the worst. I was sick for 17 days after that meal. Like, always look for the crowds. I mean, that's what, Anthony Bourdain said that years ago. It kind of went viral. It was like, you look for the crowds, and no one's going to be poisoning their local clientele. You know, so if you're looking for locals, they're cleaning their hands, they're doing the things they need to do for that. And the other thing is fruits and vegetables, and just being aware if there's like issues with pesticides, or if they grow their vegetables in wastewater, things like that. You have to research before you go, and it's concerning for kids. It's not a big deal. You just need to like wash your fruits and vegetables. Like Mexico does that a lot, and you can't just like grab an apple and be like, here you go, child, because that, you know, they use wastewater, which is fine and safe. You just need to rinse and do all that stuff. And then for the final thing is mosquitoes. And so like, I don't care about car seats, but I'm freaked out about mosquitoes. Because really that's a way bigger deal, because if you think about dengue, it's like, that's rough. That's a really intense thing for a kid to get. And if you're in Thailand and the mosquitoes come out at a certain time of day, you can avoid that time of day. You can make sure your kids are wearing long sleeves. You can spray them with bug spray. If you know, money solves a lot of things. So if you can, like, if you're in a place with tons of mosquitoes, splash out and get the place with the AC, that's the time to do it, to kind of prevent that. And those are the big ones. The next thing is really just talking about comfort levels. And I want to talk about this because I feel like we've done so many like super budget things. And I wonder if people think that you have to spend a lot of money to always have a hotel for your kids because they can't handle sleeping on the ground. We did a bike camping trip across Europe. We went across France. And I was on a mission at that time because I kept hearing all these people being like, complaining about that you must have a lot of money to do this. So I was like, I made a point. I was like, I'm going to do this with no training, like ready, I'm biking across Europe today, nothing, no training. I had jeans on. There's a picture of me with the bikes. I was wearing jeans. Like, I'm going on a bike trip. Like, I can ride a bike, that's all you need. You can see it right on my blog. But I want to make a point that you literally do not need to do any, like, people go out there and spend $5,000 on gear. We spent $750. And that was for 2 bikes, 2 sets of panniers, and a bike trailer. And we used local Spanish language websites, but even if you don't speak the local language, you can always Google Translate and like text them and just be like, pretend like you speak the language, and then just show up with money. They will figure it out from there, you know? And so we biked across France. It took us about a month. It rained every single day. It was the month of July. That year, it rained every day. My kids did not complain once. They had the time of their lives. We slept on the ground inside that tent. We had one of those like thin, they do nothing. We had a sleeping bag. That was it. And it was 4 of us in like a 3-person tent, basically, biking all day. They loved it because we were running around in the woods. We were going in rivers. We were looking at castles. There was fresh cherries falling from trees. My children probably ate like a pound of cherries every day for breakfast because they were just like, people in France have a lot of like, they'll have fruit trees and they just don't pick them and they're just dropping. So we were like, every morning like filling our pockets. My kids love baguettes. They are connoisseurs on croissants. Brie in France is about $1 for like a wedge of brie. And so we lived on about $5 to $10 a day for the month of biking. I was like, it's practically free. But on the other hand, I saw a man when we were in Croatia who was clearly homeless, and he had a bike with panniers like ours. And I was like, what is the difference between traveling and being completely homeless? I'm not sure. But my kids look back on that trip as the best time of their lives because it was literally for them, what they saw was, we kind of customized it. We'd get up in the morning when the sun came up. We'd put them into the trailers. They would sleep for an hour or two, like from like 6 to 8, while we biked. And I was listening to like Rihanna. I was like, you know? And then they'd wake up and they'd get croissants, which they're like, yes. They get like all like raspberries, blackberries, like all this fresh fruit just piled on them. They're like, yes. They got to be messy as they wanted. They didn't have to take baths, you know? They got to play, like, they were like, I mean, we've been living in a city so much, so they were like hitting sticks against trees and stuff was amazing to them. And that was just an awesome trip. So in the end, I think, you know, what we ended up learning as a family, kind of doing all of this stuff is that when you're traveling with little kids, there are things you do have to worry about, but there's so much that is, you know, is going to kind of work itself out. And then you have this time with your kids that I feel like I've had this amazing childhood with them and this bond that's hard to really describe, even just how connected you are when you spend 24 hours together as a family like that. And like that, my kids trust me implicitly, and they are connected to me and to each other, and they are calm. And everyone always says, your kids are so well behaved. And it's like, I feel like it's because we fill up their needs all the time. And they have this, this maybe like this tribal way of living, you know? Maybe this is like travel in a way sort of imitating the way we used to at some prehistoric time would raise children, just by like taking them with us and letting them see the world. So I highly recommend it. Bring your babies. And one last thing, if you do get pregnant on the road, you can have a baby overseas. I don't know if you know that. If you are in a position where you leave and you can't, like if this is for Americans too, it's like if you cancel your health insurance and then you're like, how do I get back into the system? It costs, I had 2 babies in Mexico and I had a baby in Oregon. My experience in Mexico was better. The quality of care was better. And it was $2,000 for a C-section. I have preeclampsia, so I always have issues, but I had a C-section with my first, $20,000 covered by insurance. And then it was a C-section, including prenatal care, was $2,700 US out of pocket. And I've looked into prices. You can do that in Thailand. You can do it, you know, pretty much if you go to Beirut, I looked into it there. I've been pregnant everywhere. You can get, if you're pregnant and traveling, you can get your prenatal tests in any country, anywhere, out of pocket. I got my prenatal, you know, like they do all the tests in the beginning, and then the 6 weeks, you have the whole routine of stuff, the blood work. You just walk in. A lot of people speak English. It's easy to find English doctors if you can't. And the out-of-pocket cost for me to get all of my initial blood work was something like $78, including the appointment and all of the blood work in Beirut. So it's like, for Americans, like that's like pretty much unheard of. So if you find yourself pregnant, you can continue traveling. If you want to have a baby overseas, there's a lot of options. And babies are literally in every country. So you will be good to go. So I'm a little early, but that's okay. Thank you guys so much.